I had a different episode in mind. It was going to be about two studios. A company that found independence and kept it, and a company that spent 30 years reaching for the same thing and kept finding itself in a different version of the same room. I was going to call it the Bungie number. 7 as an identity, a private religion stitched into every franchise they ever touched, and this is episode 7. The 7th time I have had to sit down to use this channel to talk about this industry, the worlds these people build, and what those worlds do to people who live in them. And then, May 21st happened, and I sat on it for 2 weeks, because I didn't want to kick anybody while they were down. Not the studio, not the community. That episode, the one I had planned, would have done just that. So it sat, and I watched. And what I watched was interesting enough that it became its own thing entirely. This is not that episode. What this is something that will happen to you regardless of what you are doing, regardless of where you are in your life, regardless of whether you saw it coming. This is that conversation. Grief. Grief hits everybody different. The loss of a person. An opportunity that slipped away or into somebody else's hands. A car that got you from A to B for years and gave out just one morning with no ceremony. A game you spent a decade of your life inside that announced its final content update on a Thursday, and almost nobody inside the building knew before you did. The shape of what you lose changes everything about how it's going to land. But the landing itself, the specific arrival of something you cannot argue with, that part is the same for everybody. I want to be clear about what this episode is not. It is not an autopsy of Destiny 2. The timeline of how we got here, the content vaulting, the seasonal model, the Activision split, the Sony acquisition, the 800 million written down against Bungie's assets on a balance sheet. That conversation happened last episode. I'm not going to reopen it. It is not an I told you so. The previous episode could have been framed that way, and I worked very hard to make sure it wasn't. So far I've been building up a little bit of a reputation for being critical of the studio. This episode has less interest in any of that framing. You don't kick people while everyone is down. That is not an analysis, that is just kicking. And before I go any further, I want to say something about where I'm standing while I say all of this. I call it clinical detachment. What I mean is this. I am not someone who was in the game last Tuesday. I walked away before the final act. I gave years to this franchise and then reached a point where the game stopped feeling like it was mine. And I just stopped logging in. I'm watching this from next to the grief, not above it. My years in it are real. The distance I have from its ending is also real. Both of those things are true at the same time. And I think it matters that you know which vantage point this is coming from. What this episode is an observation about what grief looks like when it arrives in a community all at once. About the specific ways people handle it when the thing they are losing was never just a game. I was going to talk about two studios. One that figured out independence early and built an infrastructure that made it permanent. Steam is not a game. Steam is the reason Valve never has to answer to anyone about a ship date, a price point, or a quarterly return. Gabe Newell built a room and locked the door from the inside, and has been working in it ever since. Their current game, Deadlock, has been in unmarked public beta for over a year. No announcement, no marketing, no price, just the game. Available updated constantly, accountable to nothing but itself. Their symbol is a lambda, a measure of radioactive decay, the thing that remains after the reaction. The other studios spent 30 years fighting for that same room and kept arriving at a different version of the one they'd left. Left Microsoft after 5 games, split from Activision mid-contract, made the independent speech, sold to Sony for $3.6 billion and called it a partnership. Their number is 7, not the game count, the number in the mythology. Halo's lore built on 7s the way scripture builds on 3s, a private religion pressed into the architecture of everything they ever made. That was the episode. The Lambda versus the 7. Decay versus devotion. And then Bungie interrupted itself the way Bungie always does. On May 21st, they announced that Destiny 2 would receive its final live service content update on June 9th. The time this video will be up. The game would remain playable. Active development was ending. 9 years of weekly resets, seasonal narratives, raid launches, and balance patches. Done. Don McGowan was Bungie's general counsel. He was in the room when the $3.6 billion acquisition was negotiated. After the announcement, he posted on LinkedIn. He said he was not happy to see what had become of one of the most famous studios in gaming, and that he wished he could have done more to keep it alive. Then he said this: "It's now becoming what I feared after the Sony acquisition. A publishing imprint that may also make a game every now and then, but not a builder of worlds." A builder of worlds. The person who helped sell the studio to Sony is now describing what the sale produced. That episode became this one. The tale of 2 studios will keep. This won't.
I'm Ozzy Osbourne, and I'm the Prince of Darkness.
Cut! The Lich King is the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy.
Well, maybe you're the one who's been riding a crazy train, but I've been the Prince of Darkness since 1979.
There can be only one Prince of Darkness.
Giant!
World of Warcraft. Try it for free at warcraft.com.
Rated T for Teen.
What's your game?
World of Warcraft is 22 years old and still receiving content updates. RuneScape launched in 2001 and is still running in 2 versions simultaneously. Warframe has been in active development since 2013. And here's one. DC Universe Online. Sound off in the comments if you remember this game or just found out about it. That launched in 2011 and is still releasing content patches in 2026. Some of these games are old enough to have started a family. And then there's Final Fantasy XIV, a game I have been falling in love with as of late. That game launched in 2010 as one of the most expensive failures in the history of the medium. Square Enix took it offline, rebuilt it from the ground up, and relaunched it in 2013 as A Realm Reborn. It became one of the most celebrated MMOs ever made. And then, Destiny 2. Launched in 2017, and 9 years later, it is going into maintenance mode. As of this recording, there are over 300,000 signatures on a petition to greenlight Destiny 3. And I just have to ask, where was that for Titanfall? Last year, EA canceled the game in the Titanfall franchise and laid off well over 300 people. The community grieved, of course. There was no 300,000 signature petition. There's a Steam thread asking if Titanfall 2 still has players in 2025 or 2026. That is what the corporate nod looks like. We hear you. We are not pursuing this at this time. The people that make the statements of, well, just come play our game, are not offering a remedy. They are standing next to someone whose house burned down and handing them a different key. The architecture is different. The memories don't transfer. Since the announcement, people have been sorting themselves into rooms. The first room is the petition room. There was a Change.org petition asking Sony to fund and greenlight Destiny 3. The people in this room know it probably won't work. They are signing it because it is the only gesture available. Because when the thing you love is ending and there is nothing you can do about it, sometimes the gesture is the point. The send-off is the point. I understand that room. I have been thinking about walking into it myself, not because I think it will change anything, but because I still believed in this franchise, and this is how you say that out loud when there is nowhere else to say it. The second room is more verbose, louder. These are the people pointing fingers at the first room. Where were you when this game was running? You were in the forums every day telling Bungie everything was wrong, and now you want them to make more of the thing you said was broken. These people are not wrong about the history. The question is whether this is the right week for it. The third room is the one with the marathon players in it. Some of them have been responding to grieving Destiny players with, well, our game is still going at least. Come try Marathon. Some of the folks in this camp are just telling you to, well, you can go play Marathon, or why don't you try Warframe? Because Destiny 2 and Warframe have as much in common as Madden has with NBA 2K. The suggestion is not a solution. It is a way of closing a conversation without ever having to have it. The people doing it are uncomfortable with grief and are handing out the nearest available alternative. It doesn't help, but it is very human. Then, there is what happened between two of the community's most prominent creators. Astacross, probably Destiny 2's largest content creator, said the following on camera. I want Destiny 3. I want this universe expanded. And Marathon, if I have to bury you myself to send that message, I shall. I will do everything I can to destroy you. To piss on your corpse and light you on fire afterwards. To send even the smallest of messages to Bungie leadership and Sony. Naturally, he later walked it back. He told his audience not to harass Marathon players. The original statement is on the record. Mylan Games responded. Mylan spent 10 years documenting Destiny's lore on YouTube. In response to what was happening, he privated the entire archive. His statement: rather than working together, y'all wanted this to be a war between Marathon and Destiny. On that note, I have privated 10 years of Destiny lore videos. Good luck with the cohesive story if Destiny 3 ever happens. It ain't in the game. It's not in the studio because it was vaulted. It's 10 years of lore documentation, just gone from public view. Grief eating the archive of the thing it is grieving. And underneath all of this is a structural reality nobody in either room is going to look at directly. If Marathon fails, Sony will not greenlight Destiny 3 out of guilt. They will evaluate whether Bungie as a studio is worth continuing to fund. The Destiny players petitioning for Destiny 3 by trying to destroy Marathon are potentially destroying the only building that could ever make it. The anger is aimed at the last possible source of the thing being mourned. But grief does not think strategically. It just fires. When the announcement dropped, Astacross was streaming. His chat thought a content update had gone live, or that we finally got the state of the game address that we were supposed to be receiving, supposedly. The moment they realized what that actually was, the shift in a stream chat from excitement to something else takes about 30 seconds. and it is very difficult to watch. Content creators who built their careers around this game had to process two things at the same time: a grief question and a career question. My name is Bife, who spent years documenting Destiny's lore, wrote about the developers who care about games as an art, as a third space, as a social experience, as a fulfilling job. One response looking outward at the people who built the thing, one looking inward at the person who built a living around it. Both are just grief, just aimed at different walls. Then, the voice actors came out. Deborah Wilson, the voice of Savathun, delivered an in-character farewell message. All things must come to an end. Brandon O'Neill, the voice of Crow, delivered something more specific. He began in character, calling on Guardians to gather at the tower on June 9th for one final update. Then he stepped out of character and thanked the community for supporting his journey as Uldren and Crow across the years. Then he added his support for We Want Destiny 3. He later confirmed the support was genuine. He said he would be very happy to be involved if a third entry was ever made. That message, the specific movement between character and person and then advocate, is a very precise document of what this franchise meant to the people who built it. He wasn't just saying goodbye to a video game here. He was saying goodbye to a version of his career that had given him something real, and asking for one more chance to continue it. There is a kind of grief people experience when a thing they built, part of themselves around, just disappears. The relationship was real enough, though it wasn't reciprocal. You put time into it, you structured your week around it, you built a vocabulary, and when it ended, the people around you who don't understand what you're even grieving make it harder, not easier. It was real. The hours were real. The friendships that formed inside those hours were real. The people who are angry this week are not angry at a video game. They are angry at the end of something they loved, and they are doing what people do when they have nowhere clean to put it. The sentiment around Destiny 2 has been trending upwards since the announcement. Monuments of Triumph is generating genuine excitement. Players are looking at the changes coming in the final update and saying these are the things we have been asking for, things that could have been done at any time. The game, at the very end of its life, is finally being the thing some part of the community always believed it could have been. That sits alongside the grief, without resolving it. I want to keep this brief, but I feel it needed to be included. This is also the week Marathon went free-to-play. Not out of generosity, out of strategy. The game launched at $40 to a divided reception. Player counts declined 59% from the post-launch peak, before the free week even began. Marathon was sitting well below what it really should have, and what I believe Sony or Bungie more than likely doesn't want for their new project. A game that was built primarily for PC, intended to be Bungie's next major franchise. The free week ran from June 2nd to June 9th, the time this video is live. The same day the free period closes is the same day Monuments of Triumph drops. Those two things happening simultaneously is not comfortable for anyone at Sony looking at numbers. There's one detail that confuses me. 2 months after Marathon launched, Destiny 2 outpaced it in concurrent players. A game in active decline, winding down to its final update, is pulling more people than the game that was supposed to replace it. Make no mistake, dear viewer. I'm not telling you this to bury Marathon. The people who made Marathon are the same people who found out about Destiny 2's ending on a Thursday with the rest of us. The game director said publicly that the game is still overwhelming to learn and that they are still figuring out the in-game balance mix. That's an honest statement from someone trying to fix something in real time. What I'm telling you is that the stakes of what happens to Marathon next are not abstract at all. Don McGowan said Bungie was becoming a publishing imprint rather than a builder of worlds. If Marathon isn't going to find its footing, the question of whether Bungie continues to exist as the thing it has always been becomes very concrete very quickly. The Destiny players who want to destroy Marathon to send a message are potentially sending a different message than the one they intended. The final update is called Monuments of Triumph. It was originally called Shadow and Order. It was delayed 3 months and renamed Classic. Sparrow Racing League is coming back. The director's screen that players had been asking to have returned is coming back. Small story beats for characters people have spent a decade with. Easter eggs scattered across the solar system. Raid loot refreshed. Legendary marks returning as earnable currency. Seasonal events, rewards made permanent, available through vendors going forward. And the Pantheon returning as a permanent activity. Bungie reportedly allowed Destiny 2 developers to keep working on Shattered Cycle and future content even after leadership had already decided to end live service support earlier in the year. The people building the next thing did not know there would be no next thing. They kept working anyway. Someone at Bungie, probably a lot of someone's, spent their last development cycle trying to give people something worth holding. Some of them may not have known it was going to be the last one. The announcement called it a collection of love letters to the community. That is marketing language, but it is also true. The specific choices in that update, the return of things people had been asking about for years, the character send-offs, the Easter eggs that will take weeks to find. Almost all of Bungie found out about the shutdown when you did. The people who built the love letters were not in the room when the decision was made. They found out on a Thursday, with the rest of us. Some of them kept building content for a future that had already been cancelled. I don't really know what to do with that. I'm just going to leave it there. We're going to be going a little off script, but that should be okay. Bear with me. One of my favorite franchises in gaming is Splinter Cell. Sam Fisher. It's a franchise I will defend until I cannot. There was a moment in Splinter Cell Double Agent, the very first mission. Fisher goes out with a rookie named John Hodge, and Hodge breaks up from his assignment against Fisher and Lambert's specific instructions. He gets cornered, he puts his hands up, and gets shot. Lambert says something to the effect of, "He did not break." Fisher in reply, "No, but he died and his death was totally avoidable." Lambert is trying to find dignity in it. Fisher refuses, because the truth of what happened does not become easier to carry by dressing it up. I kept returning to that exchange throughout the weeks I've been attempting to write this episode. The people responsible for the decisions that got us here are mostly gone now. Pete Parsons left Bungie in 2023. The executive structure that drove the acquisition weight has moved on to other things. The content vaulting that took things from players who had paid for them. The seasonal model that turned a game into a job nobody had ever applied for. The decisions that ended this were made by people in rooms who had options. Those people are gone. What remains are the developers who kept building content for an expansion that had already been cancelled. A stain on a catwalk with nobody left in the room to answer for it. His death was totally avoidable. As I said, I walked away from Destiny 2 before the final act. The game stopped feeling like mine, and I stopped logging in. When I came back to gather footage for episode 6, it felt like visiting a place I used to live in. The furniture was still there. The light came through the windows the same way, but I had not been sleeping there. There is a memory I have, sitting in orbit, my ship rotating slowly against the stars. My clan, the group of friends that I had played with, that just started falling apart the way clans fall apart, gradually, and then all at once. And I was logging in without a plan because logging in without a plan was something that I still did. What had happened before that was this. It's January 17th, 2024. 3 of my best players had sent me a message. It was a lot of careful language, diplomatic. They wanted to explain themselves and not hurt me. There were scheduling issues, activity mismatches. They were looking for a more active group. They said Helljumpers, the community that we are in, would remain friends. They meant it. I typed a response because that is what leaders need to do. Acknowledging them. Telling them that I had watched them grow as players and as individuals. And then I just sat with it. The message was considered and honest, and it still landed like a door closing. Not because they were cruel, but because I was the leader, and the leader has to absorb it. And the anger had nowhere clean to go. What it left behind was the 3 best players in my PvE roster, all gone at the same time. Dungeons I ended up running solo, not out of want, but because there was nobody really left to queue with. Playing an MMO alone. The game had already been turning into a spreadsheet check more than a video game, and this sealed it. I disbanded the clan quietly and rebuilt it from whoever remained. The people who left showed back up in the Helljumper server anyway because their new group wasn't as active as they had hoped. And I let them back in because they were still my friends. I remember I kept receiving messages of people asking me why, and I don't have an answer and I still don't today. Community is community. As I said, I gave years to this franchise and this company. 6,000 across platforms. That's not a casual relationship. That is a specific kind of devotion, and I am not above grieving the end of it. I'm just grieving it at a different distance than someone who was there last Tuesday. When something leaves, you only ever remember what that took. It's like an ex. You remember the good times you shared, but in the end, you remember why that fell apart. You remember what it cost you. And you carry that alongside everything it ever gave you. Because grief doesn't let you choose which parts to keep. The people signing the petition, the people yelling at those people, the people handing out Warframe recommendations, all of them are saying the same thing. They had a place. It is closing. That deserves to be acknowledged, without a verdict attached. In 2011, Bungie turned 20 years old. They were still finishing the Halo arrangement with Microsoft. Destiny did not exist yet, at least as a public thing. The studio held a Bungie Day celebration on July 7th. They sold merchandise through their online store and donated the proceeds to charity. They made a shirt. The slogan on it was, "Burn bright, burn blue." It was a limited run. The community went looking for it for years after it had sold out. That phrase is older than Destiny. It predates the seasonal model, the content vaulting, the acquisition, the 800 million that was written down. It belongs to a version of the studio that was 20 years old and selling charity shirts and had not yet become the thing that would end its flagship game on a Thursday without telling its own people. And then there's this. On June 19th, 2000, when Bungie announced it was selling to Microsoft, there was a user named Hippie Man who posted the following on the Bungie forums. I bought this game in '94, called Marathon. It was the coolest thing I had ever played. The Bungie that made that marathon is gone. The name is the same, but they are gone. Someone posted that to the Marathon subreddit during the week I was writing for this episode. Time is a flat circle. The people who loved Marathon in '94 felt this when Bungie went to Microsoft. The people who loved Halo felt a version of it when Bungie left. The people who loved Destiny are feeling it now. 26 years later, and Hippie Man's sentence is still true. The name is the same. Something keeps changing underneath it, and the community keeps writing the same eulogy, with different names in it. What I want to say to the people in the first room: the gesture matters, even if the outcome doesn't. You built something inside that world, and the fact that the world is closing does not retroactively subtract from what you built. The friendships were real. The hours, they were real. The feeling of clearing a raid with people who became important to you, that is not diminished by the update schedule. It happened, and it was yours. What I will say to the people in the second room: you are allowed to be frustrated. You are also standing in the same place as the people you are frustrated at. None of you are outside the grief. You are just expressing it differently. And what I want to say to the people in the third: let people have their moment. The recommendation will keep. This week, the kindest thing you can do is acknowledge that someone's specific thing is ending, and not immediately hand them an alternative. On June 9th, Monument of Triumph drops. Most of you would have been playing or have been playing this update. The Sparrow Racing League will return for the last time. The director's screen comes back. People who built a piece of their lives inside this world will log in just one more time. Burn bright. Burn blue. Some fires announce themselves. Some just burn.